Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the extra mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now your hosts, Jackson Mummy and Megan Saya from Celebration Bar Review.
It has been an interesting week, as so many of them are in the Bar Review. A lot of things have been happening. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Megan, and why don't you lead us through the range of news stories and what's been going on?
All right, great. So first, I want to always be pointing out to people, check if you are taking the February exam, be checking your email, making sure that you're paying attention to your state board of bar examiners for the information about if your state's going online or not. The notable state that I want to talk about today who announced they're going online is Washington State. And one reason why this is a little different, and I want to highlight it, is because they have also lowered their cut score. So for Washington State, just for the February 2021 exam, the passing score required will be a 266. It's normally a 270. So that's great news if you are taking the exam in Washington State. So know that you're going to be having to do it online in February, and it will be a 266 pass rate. This really, Jackson, is in line with what we saw from Washington State with this last round. Washington State allowed a significant number of people to become basically waived into the bar in this last round. You know, I think they have tried to do things that were acknowledging the chaos and craziness of the trying to take the bar exam in the middle of COVID. So
yeah, it's interesting to me. We're seeing a couple of jurisdictions that are reducing the cut rate score, the cut score. And some of them have said California is permanent, others saying it's temporary. But it continues to be, I think, a good time to take the exam. I know that we're getting a lot of students, we're getting a lot of emails from students saying, I'm going to bail out of the February test and go to the July test. And that's fine. It's not a problem for us at all. But I want to encourage you, if you can hang in there and take the February test, you should take it strategically. This is going to be the better test to take, in my view. And so if there's no choice and you have to do July, you have to. But if you have a choice, look long and hard at these February tests. An awful lot of people are bailing out, and that means that there's fewer competition, less competition for these seats, particularly for repeat bar takers. And I know you're shaking your head, yes. It's really important, I think, if you can do the February exam, it's to your benefit. Do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about Texas, actually, because I think it's a really good illustration. And if you come on this webinar every week, if you listen to the podcast now, the pass rates are going to be favorable. And we are seeing that. It's just reality. So let's look at Texas. They released their September 2020 exam stats. And now this was the test where people sat in individual hotel rooms. So one person was in a hotel room, all the doors were opened and the proctors were out in the hallways. And there were all these mechanisms for like how they would pass you the booklet so that they stayed 6 feet apart. And so there's this really crazy, very odd setup. But even given all that, the people who actually stuck it out, took the exam, man, they were rewarded. The overall pass rate was 77%, which is fantastic. And then when we break it down, I know most of our students are repeat takers. The repeat pass rate was 42.13%. That's a pretty good rate. If I'm a repeater, I'm looking at that thinking not too shabby. Now, certainly, especially for if you are someone who is a repeater but went to an ABA accredited law school in the US, the rates were fantastic. They've got first-time takers were 87.5% pass rate here with I'm looking at the wrong thing here. Anyway, they had within the repeat students, even
was 40% basically.
Yeah, it was 50% of out-of-state takers passed who are repeaters, 50% TBE attorneys passed who are repeat takers. So even better stats. I just really want to encourage people. The numbers are saying you should take the bar.
Yeah, and to the point that you're making, Megan, there were less than 200 repeat bar takers in this September Texas exam. That is a really small number. Yeah. And so when you've got that really small number, then the competition for the repeat bar taker pass seats is just so much less that you've really got a shot. There were a total of, I think, 800, a little more than 800 first-time takers and 200 repeaters. That's unbelievable in Texas. And I think when we see the October exams in Texas, we'll get another interesting picture of this. But it is, again, this same concept that there are just not that many people taking the exam. So the ones that did it really generally stood to benefit. So that's why we're saying try and sit in the February test if you can.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we anticipate it also to be to your advantage in February, knowing, again, there are a lot of people who are going to push off, particularly because people who failed unexpectedly in this weird October exam season will probably, many of them will not have been studying. So all these first-time takers who took it for the first time in October, they anticipate passing. If they fail, they have not been studying. They will most likely, many of them will not take it in February, where normally they would, right? If they had taken the July exam right after graduating law school, failed, they would study for the February exam. I think there's going to be a lot of people who can't do that because they just don't have the time. They will not have the time to study for the February.
Yeah, I'm hearing from students, for example, in Georgia, and I know we're going to talk about Georgia in a minute, but they haven't released their results yet. And they're first-time takers in Georgia, and they're saying, do I have enough time to study for the February exam after I get my Georgia results? And, I don't know, maybe you do. It's going to be a push. And the latest that we've ever had has been California releasing results in a traditional year right before Thanksgiving. So the shortest period of time has been right before Thanksgiving to February. Now we're talking about people getting results at the end of December or in January for a February test. So I think to your point, Megan, a lot of those first-time takers who fail are going to sit out the exam. And that means that's your most strenuous competition. They're going to be sidelined. And I just don't think we can emphasize this enough. Think long and hard before you defer out of the February test.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's talk, since you brought it up, let's talk about Georgia. So they fooled people, unfortunately, with sending out an alert that they had a new update on their website that I think it said something like Georgia bar exam results. And then when people went to the website, it just said, will be released at the end of December. A rough bait and switch there. But so Jackson, we were talking last week about when can we expect Georgia? And it looks like maybe the week between Christmas and New Year's. Could that be possible?
Doesn't that sound strange and weird and not nice? I don't know. What's better, getting it Christmas Eve or getting it New Year's Eve? And we haven't heard from New York either. That's certainly another big jurisdiction that could just drop any moment, literally. I don't know. This is a bizarre circumstance at best. And I think it's really unfortunate these states are not giving more definitive guidance about when they're going to release results. So if you're in these big states like New York or Georgia that have not announced a specific date, you just got to be on the alert for it and react and be ready to go when you get your results if they're not favorable.
Yeah. And in terms of results that are coming out today, Tennessee and DC released their results, and Massachusetts released, I believe it was yesterday. So definitely we're hearing from students. There's results coming out. Make sure you're up on that if that applies to you. I know Tennessee was actually delayed for a few days because there was a problem now I'm forgetting, was it Kentucky?
Yeah.
Kentucky, unfortunately, told some students that they had passed who had not passed, and told some students they had failed who had actually passed, and took them a little while to clear up the confusion. And so really unfortunate situation there. And Tennessee, I think, uses the same software company in terms of not tabulating the actual results, but putting together the pass and fail lists.
Yeah, how tough is it to put together a list? These are the people that passed, these are the people that failed. Right. We have in years past seen mistakes like this in Georgia. We've seen it in Florida, and it's devastating. There is just no question. And you would think that they would have the kindness to say, we told you pass, so you passed. But that isn't what happened in Kentucky. They said, you didn't pass, and now we're going to be magnanimous and not make you pay a retake fee for the bar exam, but you still have to take it. And this is for people who had already announced it, made their plans, maybe taken jobs. It is really unconscionable. And I at least give Tennessee credit for pulling the plug before they put theirs out to check and make sure, an abundance of caution. But still, it is very unnerving. And so one of the things that's happening is that I'm hearing from students who are passing and saying, but I'm not sure because is it real? How do I know until I'm sworn in? That sort of stuff. And that's just the worst possible circumstance. So I don't know what it means. It's 2020, right? This is just the way everything has gone this year. There's no certainty about anything. And now apparently there's not all that much certainty about results. So I would just encourage all of you to be very cautious. It's part of the reason that we're not posting a lot on the Facebook group. We don't want people posting before they really know one way or the other, frankly. And we're trying to be very cautious because I'm just cautious generally. I just don't believe that the bar examiners have it very well in hand. And as you and I were talking about before we went live today, how many people in the bar exam world are working between Christmas and New Year's? Can you imagine what this is? Let's get results out in New York or Georgia between Christmas and New Year's. What? Are you kidding? People aren't working. So it's not really it's not an encouraging situation in my view.
Yeah.
So,
I'm still holding out hope for all of you that the results will be out everywhere but California before Christmas. Okay. That is my hope. I don't know with Georgia's announcement of late December, I'm not sure that's realistic, but man, I don't know how that works.
And we still have the Texas October results to come, and we got a lot still out there. Massachusetts, DC, Tennessee, those are good ones to have, but we still we're less than half the country has released results. It's still a big thing. And in terms of actual total number of bar takers, way less than half because of California. So,
right.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Whew, crazy. All right, Jackson, let's talk briefly about the subjects that were tested on the multi-state bar exam, the multi-state essay exam.
We can now talk a little bit about that. We've got a little bit more information. As I think most of you who are following the UBE know, in the July exams, which were in-person exams, there were 6 essays, and they were evidence, corporations, decedents, estates, and trust, a crossover, family law, Article 9 of the UCC, and property with a con law crossover. So that's what happened in July. Then in September, and Megan asked me right before we went live, is this September 9th or September 30th? I don't know. Maybe it's the same. I'm not sure. Here's what the September test looks like. It was, again, 6 essays. Civil procedure was number 1. Trust was number 2. Evidence was number 3. Agency and partnerships crossover was the 4th. Federal con law was number 5. And family law was number 6. So that's interesting. A couple of subjects that were similar from the July test. Now it gets even more interesting. We now have the October Plan B, and this, we do know there were 3 essays. And the 3 essays, the first one was partnerships and agency. So same thing that we had in September, interesting there. The second essay was in evidence. And what that means is that evidence was in all 3 exams that we are able to talk about right now. And so that was interesting. And then the third was family law. And that is another subject that was in all 3 exams. So here's when you and I were talking about it, Megan, and I said, so it's partnerships, agency, evidence, and family law in October. And you said,
were they the same questions?
There's that, which we don't know. Actually, what I was leading up to is you were like, I would love that selection.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I thought that was a great slate of subjects.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think anytime we get away from things like UCC 9 and criminal law and constitutional law, big subjects like property and torts, I think it's pretty manageable. So that's what we've got. We are still waiting for all of the release so we can see every set of questions and see what we've got and what was repeated and not. We know the subjects are the same between one of the September exams at least, and the October Plan B. We don't know if they're the same questions or not. So that's what I don't know, do we make that clearer or worse? I don't know.
Yeah, I think the thing I can't wait to see so we license all the questions and we're not sure yet with them what they're going to give us or what they're not, but I really want to see if it's the same. When you have family law, evidence, and agency partnership were on, that was the only thing in October, and then all 3 of those were in September. I want to see if they repeated the questions. There was some rumblings that the questions were the same or at least really similar, but I'm really curious and I want to see, because that was a big question, right? Was when the NCBE said, we're going to have July exam, September 9th and 10th, September 30th, October 1st, and the October exam. It was, are you writing for separate exams. So
Yeah,
want
and
to
they
see what the answer was.
they were struggling a bit with that, so that's interesting. But we've also seen that the NCBE they put out some things and then they backtracked as results have come out. We're going to come to one of these in a minute when we talk about scoring. But I think there was a disconnect between some of the public statements made, the front-facing statements by the NCBE, and what was happening in the background behind the scenes. I don't think that'll surprise most of you, but nonetheless, I think there is a disconnect, and that's troubling as we go forward, because I think we have to have confidence that what the bar examiners say is really what they're doing. And I would tell you that may not be the case all the time.
All right. With that as an intro, Jackson, do you want to talk about what we know about how this Plan B October online exam was scored on this weird not MBE?
Yeah. And I'm going to, Megan, you need to be my guardrail here. If I start to get too geeky, you can just wave your arms and say, thanks, appreciate that. Now bring it back to reality. I've been spending a good deal of time looking at score sheets from various Plan B jurisdictions. And it's important to understand each jurisdiction that did Plan B in October did their own testing, scoring. They used the same questions from the national conference if they were UBE, the same essays, and they used the same 100 multiple choice questions. Now you have to take states like Florida out of the mix entirely because they didn't use this at all. But for those of you that aren't aware, what happened in October was that there were 100 multiple choice questions. These were written by the NCBE. But you'll recall, Megan, that the NCBE said going into that, they would not score those questions. They would not scale them. They would not do anything with them. They just provide them to each state. And that's significant because traditionally in a multi-state bar exam, you're actually being compared to every multi-state taker across the country. And I think if memory serves, California, for example, actually shows your score in California and it shows your score against the whole nation, which is just an interesting number to have. Well, because they couldn't score them against the entire country, the question then became, if you're only doing 100 questions and you're putting the final bar score in a 200-point conversion, how is that going to happen? And leading up to the exam, the only state that we were aware of that said that they were going to scale it was Georgia. That's not true. It looks like every state scaled the 100 questions, at least every state that I've seen so far. And here's how they scaled them as best I can tell. Essentially what they did was they took your score on the 100 questions, your raw score. Let's say you got 55 questions correct. It looks like what they did was to double that number as though you got a 55 on the mythical second 100 questions you didn't take. Then they took that combined total, which in my hypothetical would be 110, and then each state apparently used a previous multi-state scaling to figure out where that 110 would rank in a scaled MBE 200-point score. Now, remember, they couldn't scale it against everyone else taking Plan B. They only had their own jurisdiction, and there's no way to scale that because there weren't 200 questions. So in effect, states are using their own hybrid of what this MBE scale is, and the MBE scale is different for every exam. If you've taken the exam 5 years ago, your scale was different than a year ago. Every MBE is different. And yet the examiners apparently took some prior MBE and applied an arbitrary number to that in order to get a scaled score on a 200-point score. So we see things like 133.8. 0.8? What is that? That is scaling being applied to 50% of the exam. Yeah. So what it did was it could have been that second 100 questions would have been much better for you than the first, but you don't get the benefit of that. So whatever you did on the first, they just assumed, they extrapolated that that's what you do over the whole exam. If that's true, why bother to give somebody 200 questions? Why not just give them 100 like Florida did? And the answer, the reason you don't do that is that you need 200 questions for test reliability. That's what we know. 100 questions isn't enough. And so here's the bottom line. The Plan B results are not very reliable. These multiple choice results, you basically could throw them up in the air. They didn't mean anything. It would have been fairer and more honest to say, here's your raw score, and we've decided that this raw score of 55 in my example is worth 133, but nobody did that I'm aware of. So in effect, applicants are scrambling, trying to understand what their multi-state score, their multiple choice score means. And the truth is, it didn't mean anything. You passed or failed, but it didn't mean anything. And it was not driven by how you did against a like body of bar takers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think they just created a fake world and said, we're just going to go ahead and use this one. So yeah, I think the important thing that I'm hearing from you is that if you passed, fantastic, and you don't have to worry about it. If you failed, you should not take your MBE score as indicative of how you actually would do on, let's say, the February MBE, which is actually a 200 question scaled compared to the whole country MBE test. It's not going to be apples to apples.
Absolutely. 100 questions isn't enough to determine your efficacy. If I were giving you 100 questions in a subject, that's not enough to tell if you know the subject. I have to give you 200. That is the minimum threshold, and it's an established threshold for this exam. So going to 100 questions was a farce to begin with, but the farce has been made worse by the way it's being scored. And I can't tell you that Illinois scored the same way that Tennessee scored, that Alabama scored, that DC scored. There's no way to know that. And so I think if you were, as you say, Megan, if you were not successful, that's the ultimate result. But don't obsess about your multiple choice score. Actually, don't obsess about any of the scores. Half the number of essays, half the PTs, half the multiple choice is half an exam. And that does not mean that it's 100% accurate. It means it's way less than 50% accurate, frankly. Welcome to the strange world of the bar exam in 2020.
Yeah. Anthony asked in the chat box, given that the MBE didn't mean anything, how do we improve on the February exam?
I think you just ignore your score, frankly. And if you took the exam in something less than, if you took a July or September exam that had 200 questions, that's a legit. But if you took the October Plan B, I think you just ignore it and you do what we've been talking about. You practice your questions, you do your mind maps, you go through the lectures, you go through all the steps that we've been talking about. Because we know that works. Over 30 years that I've been teaching, and then the 25 before that with our predecessor course, we know that this course prepares people well for the multi-state. I had somebody ask me a really bizarre question the other day, not someone that's not in our course, but they said that they had been told by one of the big box companies that previously used questions are no good to study from because the examiners never repeat them again. And so that's why it's better to simulate your own questions. What? I love the justification. I wrote back and said it's because they don't want to pay the royalty fee. But, you should be using those questions. They're based on the same principles of law that the examiners test over and over. So I think you can trust that and trust the materials. What you can't trust is the score you got from the bar examiners in the October exams.
Yeah. Crazy. All right, let's move on to some student questions that we got over the past week. First, is there a way for me to access the substantive multi-state lectures so that I can listen to them in double speed on my iPhone when I go to sleep?
There is a way, but it's not in the regular part of the course. I've just put up in the offer tab something called BarMaps with fast finish audio. What we did, we talked about this last week, is we've taken the audio soundtracks to our lectures and we've sped them up using some new technology, removed the air gaps, the filler gaps, and my voice doesn't, or Megan's voice, more importantly, doesn't sound like a chipmunk when we speed it up. And we put those into the fast finish, and that's something that you can play on your phone. It'll take a 3-hour substantive lecture and run it in about an hour and 35 minutes. And you can run those over and over again. So in the offer tab, I've got the BarMaps, which is the interactive videos. It also comes with mind maps, and now it comes with fast finish. We have an offer that'll save you a couple $100 from what we offer it for in the public. And all you gotta do is click on the blue link there and order that today. And that's how you'll do it. But with respect to the regular course, no, you can't speed them up. They're not designed to speed up on a phone. That's not what they're there for. So this is a separate product and a separate offering.
Great. And I guess the next question is related, and I suppose you answered it. I received the BarMaps with my Basic Plus course.
No, BarMaps is something you add extra. In the basic, on all of our courses, you're getting the regular lectures in video and audio. You're getting the outlines in PDF. You're getting the questions and answers online for everything, as well as in the PDFs. And you're getting a syllabus And then you're getting group coaching and Facebook group and these live webinars. Then you can enhance your course with products like PhotoReading, BarMaps, Multistate nutshells, the Abundance for Bar Study MasterClass, and so on. All of those are available on our website.
Let's move on to some study strategy questions. When I practice essays and the MPT, do I need to use electronic versions of the questions so that I'm becoming familiar with the electronic materials instead of paper?
Absolutely, 100%. No doubt about it. If you're taking an exam in an online jurisdiction, all of your work now should be online. Your essays, your performance tests, and your multiple choice. The entire set of questions are available online, and that's how you should be doing them. There's no doubt about that in my mind.
I feel a bit behind. What are things I can do to stay on track? Should I just move on even though I haven't read through everything? I'm a slow reader and it's holding me back.
That's a tough one, isn't it? Slow readers are self-fulfilling prophecies. And what I mean by that is the person says, I'm a slow reader, therefore I'm going to go slower because I need to go slow so that I can learn it all, so that I'll be really slow and I'm just going to be slow. And the bar exam says, see you next time, because you're not going to be ready if you do that. There is no benefit to reading slowly. In our photo reading course, we talk about the fact that the slower you read, the less your comprehension is. And that the average reader for legal material reads at 110 words a minute with less than 50% comprehension. And so you say to yourself, well, I'll read at 50 words a minute and then I'll get 100% comprehension. Nope, at 50 words a minute, you'll have 25% comprehension. So the slow reading is just something you got to stop. You just got to get rid of it and stop telling yourself that. Be a photo reader. That's the best solution. But if you don't want to be a photo reader, then you got to skim. You got to stop trying to read word for word, line for line. It's just not, the material's not presented that way. Remember that in our course, what we do is we have you skim the material or photo read it. Then you'll be doing the lectures. And in the lectures, you'll be reading the text at the pace that I'm talking or Megan's talking in the lecture. And that's a second and a third way of reinforcing the material. And then you'll be working in your practice questions. And that's a third way of getting at the material, or a fourth. And then mind mapping. I just did an interview with a successful Florida bar taker who said to me, mind mapping absolutely changed my life. It rocked my world. It made all the difference in the world. In fact, I've done a couple of recent interviews with students where they've said mind maps are the key. And I know, Megan, you're a big proponent of mind maps.
I think that what people need to keep in mind, especially as they're starting with their studies and starting with Celebration Bar Review, is that you feel, this is totally normal, everyone feels that you feel this need to know everything your first time through an outline. That is not going to happen. You will not retain and remember everything about constitutional law with one reading of the constitutional law outline. And so if you have that in your head, it causes you to go even slower. Like you said, you're actually going to retain less because you're so stressed out about, am I remembering every single word? Do I understand every single concept? And have I memorized every single concept? That it's counterproductive. And then you're not trusting that this is a process. You're not doing one day of con law and then never looking at con law again until you take the exam. Of course not. And so this is set up for you to go through in the spiral and review things over and over again and get deeper and richer understandings of them as you practice, as you discuss it, as you write an essay about it, as you do multiple choice questions. All of this practice it's a holistic method of learning a subject, as opposed to reading through an outline once and checking it off your list and saying, oh, thank goodness I never have to think about that again.
Yeah, and if you want to know more about this approach to studying, we have a MasterClass called the Abundance for Bar Study, and I put the offer up for you to check that out. It has been extremely well received. Everybody that has been through it, I think, has found it very helpful, very valuable. Had a lot of passing students in this prior exams that said, boy, it made all the difference. And it really gets at this science of learning and why you don't want to read slowly or study slowly, and how you get your brain in the right resource state. So I just want to say to you, don't limit yourself this way just because you're starting out.
Great. All right, Jackson, last question. So Georgia, I know we talked about this last week. Georgia is sticking with the open book exam for February. And so I think there's a lot of talk and confusion about what does this mean in terms of I was told all through law school and through studying with other bar review companies that this was a game of memorization. I just needed to memorize the law, and that's all that you need to do to pass. What does this mean that Georgia is sticking with this format of saying I can have notes and books and whatever I want with me in the exam on the essays? What is that?
I think it's actually bringing to light what we've been saying for years, and that is that the test is not what you can recite. It's not what you can memorize. It's why issue spotting doesn't work. I'm looking over here because just as you were saying that, I got an email from a student that said, I'm looking for private tutors for the UBE, and they're telling me, these other tutors, that the UBE is structured to be written in IRAC rather than FLA format, and that's how it's graded. That is absolute BS. That is not true, even in the least. There is no interest on the part of the bar examiners for any applicant to issue spot. Can you imagine in the practice of law saying, Your Honor, I'm going to take this 2-day trial and turn it into a 7-day trial because we're going to issue spot. I'm going to talk about all the things that aren't relevant and go through that. I'm going to show you how much law I've memorized. Look, the reality here, and Georgia has simply acknowledged, as did a few other states, that literally knowing the rules, memorizing the rules, is of no value in this current world. It just doesn't make any difference. No one's interested in that. It would actually be counterproductive to do that. And so what they're looking for is your ability to take the law and use it effectively. And that's making arguments. And it's focusing on the disputes and the conflicts. It makes me crazy that there are people out there that I think prey on bar takers by telling them that what they did in law school is what they're supposed to do on the bar, when we know that the big box bar reviews that do precisely that, the IRAC, have less than a 50% pass rate. If that were the key to being successful, those people would be passing, and they're not. So I think that open book is an acknowledgement by the bar examiners of what we've said and what we know to be true, which is the test is just not about memorization. If it were about that's what you should be doing, is taking a memory course, not a bar review. And so I feel like people are missing the boat so badly when they do that. And then they look for a cheap way or an alternative, or somebody puts up a flyer on Craigslist and says, I'll teach you how to pass the bar. Really? Don't do that. Really don't do that.
Somebody just wrote, I remember you mentioning earlier that one of the best tools for working on an essay, especially in a state like Georgia where the test is open book, is to make sure we have
mind maps, I hope.
Mind maps. So let's talk about that. Yeah, basically, how should we use that to study when preparing for an open book test?
You want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, sure. So the process of making your mind map is actually part of studying. It's not just that you have that tool for the exam, but it is vital. So if you're in Georgia and you're taking this open book exam, you need to be making mind maps like yesterday. But the process, I suggest them for everyone though, because the process of making the mind maps helps you solidify and understand the information. So every time you write an essay, you should, as part of your process, when you're done writing the practice essay, you should go in, look at the sample answer, the model answer, the drafter's point sheet, whatever's in there, and look at all the principles of law, look at all the conflicts, and then put those principles into the appropriate place on a mind map. Make sure that you understand them. If you don't understand it, you go back to the outline. See, there's that outline again. You go back to the outline. Maybe you go back to the lecture. You make sure that you understand what the concept is. Are there any elements to it? Are there any requirements that need to be there? Are there any sort of special circumstances of this only applies when the defendant is X, right? Or whatever the situation is. Make sure you understand those things. Put that in your mind map. Then you're seeing how it fits together within the larger piece of the puzzle, okay? So you're seeing how it fits in the whole subject at large, and you're also going over it again. You're writing it down or you're typing through it. You're looking at it visually, and then you will reread your mind map to yourself out loud. I know you're going to sound really silly, but it's okay. Nobody can hear you. No one cares. You're going to reread the mind map. Some people record themselves reading it, and then they play that back to themselves when they're sleeping, things like that. You want to listen to it over and over again so that you understand and internalize it. That's how you actually understand the full concept as opposed to just memorizing a piece. Then if you're in an open book jurisdiction like Georgia, you will have those mind maps at the ready when you're doing your essay exams, and you will be able to flip quickly to the proper place when you know, oh goodness, this one I've got a crim law essay. I'm going to flip to crim. Oh, here's my elements for that charge. So it's all there and you can quickly access it.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation. So take that to heart, that it's how you want to be using it. If you're in the photo reading course, we've got a mind mapping webinar that's included.
We got one more person wrote a question. It says the photo reading program consistently discusses mind mapping. Is that included in the course or must we purchase all mind maps separately?
The mind mapping webinar is included in the photo reading course. If you want our mind maps that we created for every subject, you need to purchase BarMaps. That's what it is. It's the interactive videos and the mind maps that we've created for state and multi-state at a couple different levels, and you can copy those or enhance them, particularly if you want to use MindMeister, the mind map software, and the fast finish. So again, all of that is there. Now you could make your own mind maps.
Right. I was going to say, mind maps, you need at bare minimum, you need a computer with a word processor of some kind, or you need a piece of paper and a pencil. Like people go, I really like making mind maps by hand. Something about the physical writing is helpful for me to remember things. But maybe for you, the typing might make more sense. So it's really, these are tools. We like to give everyone optional tools, but literally all you need is your own brain and a piece of paper, whether it's digital or physical piece of paper. So
yeah, the reason we added it to the BarMaps is that if you want to save time, we've done the hard work, we've done the grunt work for you. And believe me, it's worth it for us to get the grunt work out so that you can put in the details. Some of you don't want to do that. That's okay. But it's a pretty cool enhancement. And I will say everyone that's got BarMaps has raved back to me. I've gotten great response. I've had nobody say, oh, this doesn't work, I don't like it. So I really encourage you to check it out. It's a great resource. It's in your permanent library, and I encourage you to check it out. At least click on the button and look at it and find out about it. All right. We will be back before Christmas. We'll have some more results. Maybe we'll have heard from New York by then, I hope. I don't think we'll have heard from Georgia, but we'll have a few more. And so we want to just, for all of you that are waiting for results, we wish you the very best. We know that this is an uncertain time. And we know that even when the results come out, they may not be something you can trust for a while. So this is a weird season. Hang in there. And for those of you that have begun your studies for 2021, good for you. Get going. If you haven't started, start now and keep your focus. In spite of everything that's going on, that's going to be your best chance at success, I think. So want to thank you all for being with us. Thank you, Megan, for being here. And we will see all of you again next week. And stay safe and healthy, everyone. And we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening and watching the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at celebrationbarreview.com.